Welcome to another episode of we're changing the name, as I've said a few times. It's Make Mental Health Matter Show. And our theme on Mondays is Mental Health Mondays. See, not about perfection. I've said this across the board. And I always say we, I don't know why. I am excited as the host of Make Mental Health Matter and having the theme of Mental Health Mondays to be able to really shift. And we're moving to this new platform as of today, which we stream to E360, Achieve TV channel, and so many other streaming platforms. So I am really excited, first and foremost, to introduce myself to those of you that have never watched my show in the past. So I have been doing Mental Health Mondays since November of 2021. And I showcase guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or those that experience a mental health challenge. And they come on and share their journey and their stories through their challenges and into that hope piece of what got them to the place that they are today. And it's so amazing. Every single week, all of my guests really topple over each other. The thing that I'm really excited here is that not only are we going to be doing Mondays at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we're also adding an additional hour on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. And our theme for Wednesdays will be Warrior Wednesdays. But without further ado, I would love to bring up my guest for today, Terry Tucker. So let me bring him in. Thank you so much, Terry, for joining me.
Well, Kelly, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. As I mentioned, professionally started out at Wendy's. Then I moved to hospital administration. And then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And one of the things I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. After law enforcement, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020. For the last almost 11 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I mean, so many different jobs that you've had. Yeah, no. I guess you could say a rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, just starting off in restaurant or fast food, right? And then leading into hospitals, which, they have their own challenges, and then going into law enforcement, and now being battling cancer. So the journey definitely has added some interesting things into what probably makes you do what you do now.
It does. I've been very fortunate when I sort of either hear somebody recite my resume or go through it myself. I kind of figure one of these days I got to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, kind of thing. But I've been very fortunate. I always felt my passion was to be, or my purpose was to be in law enforcement. And if you understand the sort of the backstory of my life, my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And so he was in Chicago during Prohibition when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression in the late 1920s, early 1930s. And when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys, were shooting up the town, and he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was like, absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business, going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's what my father wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose in life was. So I had a choice. As I said, my dad was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. So I could have said, sorry, Dad, I know you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding the backstory, it sort of makes sense now that my first two jobs were in business, because I did that because it's what my dad wanted me to do. And then I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away. And then I followed my own dreams and became a police officer. So it was an interesting career. I learned a lot in the business world that I was able to apply in my law enforcement career, but business was just not, it wasn't something that I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and go do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I hear you there. When I was in college, I started a business degree and I was like, this is so boring. And I pivoted from that moment. I was like, man, I got to find something that I'm actually interested in. And now, of course, I have a business. So, interesting how it shifts and you make those changes. And, like you said, you did what any good son would do, and you did what your dad wanted you to, but then you did what you wanted to do after he passed. And so, when you went into law enforcement, I mean, what was that experience like?
I was old, in all honesty. I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer. So by law enforcement standards, that's pretty old to be getting in that line of work. I know I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts did. But it was what I wanted to do. It was I couldn't wait to get up and go to work. And how can you make a difference? How can you help people? And so it was just so much fun for me. I mean, it's been a number of years since I've been out of that. And I think law enforcement in a lot of ways has changed, not necessarily for the better these days, but, I still have friends that are in it that I talk with and things like that. And it's, I've had so many jobs in my life, but when people ask me, what did you do? And when they're looking for a career, I always immediately jump to law enforcement. I was a police officer. I could have said I was in marketing or I was in hospital administration. But for me, not that it was my identity, because I did see quite a few officers that, had been in the job for 30, 35, 40 years and couldn't retire because their whole identity was tied up in what they did, in the, in the gun and the badge and the authority that they had. That wasn't necessarily the case for me. I was able to do other things after my law enforcement career, but it was definitely something that, it was in my blood. And I think it was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, because you are a hostage negotiator, I mean, that to me, it feels really intense, or you have to have, I don't know if I'm right in this saying, but you would have to have some sort of like psychology or negotiation or I'm sure they put you through all of that training to really get like the psychology behind how to negotiate in a hostage situation. So I just think that is really interesting also.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think a lot of, as a police officer, the interesting thing about being a negotiator, when you're a police officer, 99% of what you do in your job is with another person. Whether you're pulling somebody over to give them a ticket for speeding or whether you're answering a radio run for a fight, you are usually face to face with another person. And you can take visual clues from what that person does. I mean, if they're, you're talking to them and they're kind of looking around, maybe they're looking to try to escape, to try to run from you. If they're balling up their fists, maybe they're going to want to fight you. And you can see that, and you can do something about it. You can sit them down, you can handcuff them, you can put them in the back of your car, whatever is appropriate for why you're there. But as negotiators, we were not with the person. We could not see what was going on. And I remember as a negotiator, and I'm going to see if I can remember it, there was a formula that was like 7, 38, 55. And it basically said when you're trying to communicate with somebody, when you're trying to give a message, 7% of that message is the words you say. 35% or 38% of it is the tone of voice that you use, and 55% of it is your body language and facial expressions. So if you think about more than half of delivering a message to somebody is their body language and facial expressions, we didn't have that as negotiators because we weren't with the person. So if we said something, we couldn't see if the person, kind of was like, oh God, like what an idiot. I can't believe he said that to me, but we couldn't see that. So we had to figure things out, certainly based on what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. So you got good at that. We had a psychologist that worked with us in training. We would do scenarios, and then the psychologist, we debrief, and the psychologist might say, did you think that person maybe was schizophrenic and they were off their medicine or something like that? So it was constant learning, constant, different scenarios. And did you think about this? And did you think about that? And, no scenario is exactly the same as another one. So it's just a constant on the job training, and you do the best you can with what you got. And sometimes we had a lot, sometimes we had no idea why this person, took a hostage or why this person barricaded themselves. We had no idea. So, we were talking earlier before we started, you go down a rabbit hole. And if it's the wrong rabbit hole, they'll tell you. They'll be like, no, you idiot. That's not what I'm talking about. Oh, okay. So you kind of have to back out. And the whole overarching theme of what we did was really trust. It's hostage negotiator and hostage taker. It's a relationship. And it's just like a parent or a child or a husband or wife or a boss or a subordinate. And you're trying to build that trust. We called it tactical empathy. Help me understand where you're coming from. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to agree with you, but help me to understand it. If we're going after a homicide suspect, I'm not going to say, yeah, I think you killed 3 people. I think that was the right thing to do. No, but help me to understand why you did what you did. And that way I can try to help you get out of this safely if that's what you want.
Yeah. All of that, at least for me, I am fascinated by why the brain does what it does. That's why I do what I do too.
Right.
But a lot of times, even because we do mental health classes and we talk a lot about in crisis situations and how to help somebody. And if you're calling 911 and you're letting the dispatcher know like the certain information, we tell you what to tell them, but then also having, whether it be the person or the first responder, or if they can get a mental health crisis specialist out there. And I think like what you said is that it's that trust. You don't have that facial or the nonverbal cues. You can't look at those. And so you have to listen for the cues of what they are or aren't saying. And I think that, man, that's just a whole nother skill that is very impressive to me.
Well, thank you. It certainly is. And there were a lot of times during a negotiation where you'd spend, hours over here talking about something when the real problem was over here, and they didn't trust you enough. We hadn't built up enough rapport for them to talk about that. And I always kind of describe what we did as sort of, we've all been to the park as kids on a seesaw or a teeter-totter, and when we would start negotiating with the person, a lot of times their emotional side, their emotional brain would be way up in the air and their rational brain would sort of be down on the ground. And over time, by asking them open-ended questions and letting them burn off a lot of that emotional energy, you would bring that teeter-totter, that seesaw sort of to equilibrium. And then hopefully over more time, you get to the point where their rational brain is way up in the air and their emotional brain is down on the ground, because I think we all would agree that we usually make better decisions for ourselves when we use our rational brain as opposed to our emotional brain. And so, it was a lot of, give and take, a lot of back and forth. We never lied to people. People would say to us, hey, okay, I'll come out, but you got to promise me I'm not going to go to jail. And we would have to say, well, I'm sorry. When you come out, you are going to go to jail. And then we would try to deflect the conversation to something that was more palatable, something that, was more positive. And that, so we never lied. And the reason we never lied was because there was a very good chance that a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, we were going to be right back in the same situation, negotiating with this person, because the problem, the underlying problem didn't go away. And if they ever felt like, hey, Tucker, you lied to me, 2 years ago, then you're going to have to bring in another negotiator, because my credibility, that trust factor is like, look, I don't trust you. You lied to me. It's like, okay, I get it. You got to talk to somebody else. So that's why we never lied to people. And we also never gave something without getting something. So somebody would say, I want a cigarette. Give us a magazine out of your gun then. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, then I'm not giving you a cigarette. So it was, you had to be a person of your word. You had to be, if I give you a cigarette, you'll give me your magazine. Okay, fine. And that just goes to building that trust component that is so important to doing that job.
Yeah, huge. And I mean, communication, trust, not lying, having that accountability. And I mean, I could literally probably talk about this all day, but I do want to also shift and pivot, because now you are battling through cancer, which I know that when you wrote in, you said that you have had to amputate, or have, I don't know how to properly state that, but I know that this has been a huge thing for you. So would you like to talk a little bit more about what you're experiencing now?
Sure. So I've been battling for almost 11 years now, a very rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with that. I have a rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And mine was very simple. I had a callus break open when I was a basketball coach, and eventually it didn't heal. And I went to see a podiatrist, and he took an x-ray, and he said, I think you have a cyst in there. Cut the cyst out, sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him that's, hey, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. And because your cancer is so rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center. Had the tumor taken out of my foot, had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And at the time, melanoma was pretty much a death sentence. They did not have any kind of drugs or chemotherapy or anything that really worked on it. So my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, just to kick the can down the road, to kind of buy me some more time. The problem with interferon were the side effects were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And like I said, it wasn't a cure. It was just, we're trying to buy you time. After 5 years of interferon, it became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. Fortunately, I was at a hospital here in Colorado that was a level 1 trauma center, and they were able to stabilize me. But as soon as I stopped the interferon, the cancer came back in the exact same area on my foot where it had presented 5 years earlier. That necessitated the amputation of my left foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg, 2 more surgeries in 2019. And then finally, 2020, I had a kind of an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle area that grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the COVID pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm still battling with. I'm still being treated for. And I know that sounds like a really ugly journey, and it certainly has been. But I'll tell you 2 things that I've learned. Number one, I don't think you really know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life. And secondly, I think cancer has made me a better human being.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, quite the journey. And I, of course, as an outsider would be like, man, that is a lot, right? Like, and knowing like right in the middle of a pandemic, that was the only option that you had, unfortunately, because probably places were closed down and they didn't, have full access to all the medical treatment that you needed. But having gone through that journey, still battling it to today, and the way that you're looking at it is in a positive light of this is something that, yes, I'm fighting, but it's something I can fight. And I also am learning more about myself, which is huge. Holy moly. So that is, I mean, incredible for you to look at it from that lens, and I am more than sure that's probably what really ultimately has bought you more time too. I don't know if you think that way.
I really do. I mean, I think one of the things that I learned from playing team sports, and for me, it was team sports. I think, whatever team you're a part of, whether it's your family or your colleagues, your church, whatever you do, where you have, association with other people. I think one of the things that team sports taught me, and, I started playing basketball when I was like 9 years old and played all the way up until I was 21 when I graduated from college, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And I am on a clinical trial drug now that I get an infusion every day for a week, every 3 weeks at the University of Colorado hospitals out at Anschutz. And it's probably not going to save my life. I mean, it has kept my tumors at bay, but they're still there. So it's probably not going to save my life. But the way I look at that is it might save the life of somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood work, my scans, and things like that. And to me, that's being part of something that's bigger than me.
Yeah. Wow. And my daughter actually worked on the cancer unit at Anschutz for quite some time. So maybe you guys possibly ran into each other potentially. But
Yeah.
side note, but I think I mean, just in what you stated, right? Like you don't know if it's going to save your life, but you're going through these treatments to help save other people's life. And that's something that's bigger than you at this moment. And you may or may not have limited time, right? You've been battling this for a really long time. And so I love the piece of hope that you're giving to yourself, giving to others. And, like we, I feel like a lot of times when I know people who have been diagnosed with cancer, right? There's this either, well, I can't get through it, I'm going to die mentality. Or there's people like you who are like, hey, this sucks. Like, this really sucks. I'm going through it, and maybe it's not perfect how I've been traveling this journey, but I'm going to take every single piece and every ounce of what I'm learning throughout this journey about myself, about my family, about this experience, how I can help others, and I'm going to make it worthwhile. And that I think is huge. And coming on a podcast to share your story, because I bet you there are so many people out in this world that are experiencing similar, not necessarily the specific type of cancer that you have since it is so rare, but they're having these thoughts of, I was just diagnosed, or I have or was diagnosed a long time ago. It keeps progressing. Like, I don't know what I have to live for. And hearing your story may change their whole outlook. And so I think that's just incredible that you're willing to share that with the world.
Well, thank you. You're looking at me right now. I mean, there's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I'm a human being. I have those bad days, and certainly when I was first diagnosed, I think I went through all the stages that we would associate, with grief. First it was denial. It's like, wait a minute, no, I've done everything right in my life. I've eaten right, I've exercised, I don't abuse alcohol. I've done everything right. And then you kind of you get mad. it's like, I have done everything right. Why did this happen to me? And then, you start to bargain. Our daughter was in high school at the time, started to bargain with God. It's like, look, just let me live long enough, to see her graduate from high school. And then I think I honestly got down for a while. And then I just got to a point, kind of like you said, that this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck to be, for lack of a better term, and play the cards that I've been dealt. Don't like these cards, wish they were different, but these are the cards I've been dealt, and I'm going to have to play them. And I've always wanted my life to be shaped by the decisions that I made, not by the ones that I didn't or that somebody else made for me. And I totally agree with you. There have been so many people that I've seen over this journey that, get whatever form of cancer it is, and then just turn their entire life over to a doctor, to somebody who has a bunch of initials after their name and says, okay, you tell me what to do. And I do that to a point, but I also ask a lot of questions. Why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? I'd like to do this. Does this make sense? Can I do, and I'm sure there are times when my oncologist would like to hit me over the head with a 2x4. It's like, just shut up and do what I tell you to do. But I want to be involved in this. I want to read. I want to educate myself. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any medical experience, but I certainly know my body, and I know, I remember telling the doctors when I had that tumor in my ankle, they thought it was a hematoma, and they were like, oh, we're going to do this. And I'm like, something's wrong. And they eventually sent me to an occupational therapist to try to get the swelling out of my lower leg. And even she was like, she ended up calling the doctor and said, you need to scan him. What I'm doing should be, producing results, and it's not. And so you need to scan him and see what's going on. And that's when they found out my entire lower leg was full of cancer. And, I had to have, like you say, we're in the middle of COVID. I mean, when I had my leg amputated, my wife literally dropped me off at the hospital. I was not allowed to have anyone with me. I'm in this huge pre-op room, that has different bays in it. I'm the only one there. My doctor had to get special permission to actually do the surgery. I should have been in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn, how to walk on crutches, to, learn how to function without a leg. I was in the hospital for 48 hours and then sent home. So it was, it was trying to figure it out. And like you said, we don't have all the answers, but I think we're smart enough that as people, that if we just relax for a minute and not get all bent out of shape. And, this is a podcast about mental health, of use your mind to control your body. If you can't control your mind, you're not going to be able to control your body. If you can control your mind, you can do almost anything you want to do or that you're capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of pieces that you said in there that are really important messages to hear also. Specifically that if you can't control your mind, you're not going to be able to control your body, but also, just understanding like what you went through being dropped off at the urgent care, right? To have this surgery done and nobody else could be around. There's a lot that goes into that just mentally in general. And then also not having access to the time frame that you needed specifically. But then also, it's like this journey, right? Like you talked a lot about that, the grief process that you went through. And we are all human and we all process things differently. My experience is going to be completely different than your experience. And one thing that I heard the most, what you said, is advocate. Advocate for yourself, advocate for others. It's something that I say all the time in every single class that I do, is if it's not working for you, the system itself, your doctors, a medication, whatever that might be, we have to be able to advocate because nobody knows everything, right? None of the doctors know everything. Like yours is such a rare form of cancer that even your doctor was like, I have never seen this in as long as I have been practicing. And I'm sure they had to go research it to figure out how they could help. And so it's a learning experience. I think we're all going through this journey. And sometimes we put our faith in people and assume that they know exactly how to go forward with the information that they're given. but it's a learning journey, I think, for everybody. And ultimately, it goes down to the advocation. If you're not feeling good about your results, advocate for yourself. It also goes into youth. I talk about youth a lot, is they don't understand. And you talked about the rational part of your brain also. Their rational part of the brain is not fully developed. They don't understand. So they don't fully understand. They do in ways, but advocate for them, advocate for yourself. And nobody knows everything. So that's one of the biggest pieces that I got out of what you just said was it's the process. We have to learn how to advocate for ourselves. And then we also, it's up to us, like what this journey looks like.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's been, I wish there was a gatekeeper, that could interact between, the oncologist and the surgeon. And I have heart issues because of the clinical trial drug that I'm on, and, can interact with the doctors and sort of, be a doctor, him or herself, and say, okay, well, this is how it's impacting him from an oncology point of view, but this is how it's impacting him from a cardiac point of view and things like that. And I don't have that. And very few people do. So you're absolutely right. You need, you don't know everything, but you know your body. Like this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't seem right. And why is this? I was walking on a broken leg for 2 weeks before they ever scanned me for cancer. And, I kept saying, something's not right. I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse. Why am I getting worse? What's going on? And, the doctors are thinking one thing, and I'm exhibiting symptoms in another way. And you're right. You have to constantly, and it doesn't happen like, well, I said something to him. Well, that's not advocating. You need to continually, sort of be knocking at the door, and don't feel that, hey, because this doctor has an MD and they're, a noted researcher or whatever, that you can't say, hey, something's wrong. We need to get together. We need to talk, whether it's telemedicine or whether you do it, as an in-person patient visit. You need to be able to say something's not right. My leg is getting worse, not better. Why is that? Well, we think this. Well, does that make any sense? What can we do? And I know that's hard for people. People get intimidated with doctors, especially. It's, oh, this person, went to medical school. Yeah, they did, but they don't know your body, and it drives me crazy when I've heard doctors say, oh, you got this rare form of cancer. I remember my wife and I were talking just a couple of days ago. My oncologist pulled her out of the room and told her, if he has a miracle, he'll live another 5 years. But probably it's going to be another year or two. Is he going to be okay with that? And she laughed at her and said, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Go ahead and tell him that and see what he does. But that's just me. And that's the way I'm wired. A lot of people would have just folded. It's like, oh, I'm done. I might as well just wait and go home and die. But that's a choice. That's a choice that you have. And it's been 11 years now for me, and I'm still here. And every year I get a letter from the MD Anderson Cancer Tumor Board with basically, it's a research thing. Circle one of these three. You're alive with cancer, you're alive without cancer, or you're dead. And I just keep hanging around because I haven't figured out how to circle the third one yet. So, that was a bad joke. Sorry. But yeah, people do need to advocate. And I totally agree with you, because if you don't do it for yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yeah. I heard a motivational speaker at one point in time say that his mom was diagnosed with cancer, and he actually told the doctor not to tell her the time frame that they were putting on it. So when you talked about that, it's true. It's like once they give you, whether it's a mental health diagnosis or a cancer diagnosis or whatever that diagnosis is, our brains sometimes assume that that's the end all be all. And that is now our identity. Like, I am cancer. All of a sudden we just become this massive cancer, or I am depression, or whatever that is. Right. And I think so what you said, the importance of how they said that to your wife, and she's like, well, you go tell him, because that's true. It's your diagnosis, your timeline does not have to define you, who you are, how long you're actually going to live. It's up to you, and that's something that you have to decide with the information that you're given, and nobody can tell you what is the right or wrong way. You are the one and the only one that can really decide. But I think that's an important message too, is maybe sometimes we don't need to hear how long they think. Maybe it's just understanding more of what you're now going to be facing, and the journey and the experience that might come out of what they just told you, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, they don't know your heart. They don't know your mind. They don't know your soul. They don't know that your daughter's getting married in 2 years, and by God, you're going to be there for that. I mean, I've seen so many people that have, you're not going to be here 6 months from now. I mean, my dad had end-stage breast cancer as a man back in the 1980s. They had no idea how to treat him. They pretty much sent him home to die. And he lived 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose in life. He was in real estate. He loved doing that. He worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind. It's like, well, when it's my turn, we're all going to have our turn. You need that purpose. You need to have something that's bigger than you. And if you do that, then all of a sudden the cancer isn't dominating your life. What's dominating your life is the thing you want to dominate. I want to work. I want to be with my family. I want to be here for my daughter's wedding. Whatever that is in your life, now that becomes your focus. And like you say, your identity is not cancer. It's I'm a father and I want to be there for my daughter's wedding.
yeah, definitely. So tell me a little bit more about what you do now.
I do this in all honesty. And I think it goes back to what I, was telling you about my father. I made the brilliant business decision right as COVID hit to start a motivational speaking business. And then everything shut down. I mean, there were no virtual events. There were no in-person events. And somebody had reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I, like everybody else, during that COVID time, had to figure out a different way to deliver their service, to deliver their product. And so my response to them was, sure, what's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And they explained it to me. And I thought, well, this is a different way of delivering my story, delivering my message. And so I started doing podcasts. And now I've been fortunate to be a guest on probably over 600 podcasts all over the world, just saying, here's my story. I don't have all the answers, but here are some things that have worked for me. And I'm putting them out there in the hopes that maybe one or two or all of them will resonate with you and you can take them and incorporate them in your life. So I do this, and I'm treated for my cancer every week for an entire week, every 3 weeks. So I have 2 weeks off and then I'm treated, and I do nothing during the treatment weeks. I'm just physically unable to do anything. And then these 2 weeks where I'm coming on shows like yours and talking to nice people like you, it gives me a purpose. It gives me energy. And, my wife and I always have the discussion of, no, you need to rest. You need to get your blood counts back up, and I always tell her, I get plenty of rest when I'm dead. This energizes me. This gives me a reason to keep going. And so I guess I'll just say now, thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's amazing. It's kind of similar is that I was like, yeah, I want to be a speaker. And then COVID happened and everything shut down. Like I was more focused on middle schools. And of course,
Yeah.
nobody was in schools at that time. And so I was like, well, now we're going to have to pivot and change and figure out what this looks like. So hence the reason the podcast was born too. But I just think that's incredible that you are willing to share your journey, come on podcasts, right? There's like 20 bajillion million now. So I am honored for you to want to come on mine and just share your story. And I do know you have your website. So what can people find if they go to your website?
Yeah, my motivationalcheck.com website, I put up a thought for the day every day. With that thought comes usually a question about how maybe you can apply that thought into your life. Twice a week, I put up I have a book called Sustainable Excellence. I put up a Sustainable Excellence short. It's just a 3 to 5 minute video about something either in the book or something I've found that I think would help people. And I have recommendations there for books to read, videos to watch. My social media links are there, and you can leave me a message. You can reach out to me if you have a question or you just want to say hi. And all of that is at motivationalcheck.com.
Awesome. Again, right here, motivationalcheck.com. You can go check that out. So, any final thoughts or things that you want to throw out for the audience?
Sure, I'll give you one more story. I had a nurse recently ask me, what it was like to have my foot amputated and then to have my leg amputated. And I told her it certainly has not been easy, being 6'8" and trying to learn how to walk again, or even use a wheelchair and things like that has not been easy. But what I told her was that, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Kelly. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And I'm not telling you not to go to the gym. I'm not telling you not to eat right. I'm not telling you not to get enough sleep. You absolutely should do that. But we spend a lot of time on this physical body, which eventually is going to go away, at some point in time. But what goes on, what lives on, I think, is our heart, our mind, and our soul. So please, absolutely spend time, on your physical body, but also spend some time every day cultivating, developing, getting better at, your heart, your mind, and your soul. I think if you do, at the end of your life, you're going to be a whole lot happier and you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
So good. So good. Thank you so much. I loved this conversation, and I'm so thankful that you were able to join me on the new platform this time. So thank you again so much for sharing all of those stories through this journey, and keep me updated as to where you're at. And I mean, everybody that comes on my show, I consider family. So thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Holy moly. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter, with the theme for Mondays being Mental Health Mondays. Again, my name is Kelli Melissa Reinhardt. I am the host of the show. Introduction to me, if you haven't watched it before, we do this every single Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, where I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates for mental health, or those that have experienced a mental health challenge. And we're adding another hour, which will be on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That will be the theme, will be Warrior Wednesdays. So make sure, if you are watching this on YouTube or any of the channels, make sure you subscribe, because I promise you, you do not want to miss another episode. Again, my guests just keep toppling over each other, and they give incredible information and resources to you. My personal, with those of you that don't know much about me, I am the founder of a mental health and suicide awareness nonprofit, which is BCC Evolution. This is our website, bccevolution.org. So if you need more resources, you need more information, maybe you are somebody who struggles with a mental health challenge or wants to go back and watch any of the past podcast shows that we have put up, they're all on our YouTube. They're all on our website. We also have a free resource for anybody that watches these shows. If you go to our home screen, you can download your free download. It is a safety and self-care plan that was designed by myself and BCC Evolution to be able to give you strategies for mental wellness, but then also a safety and self-care plan if you are somebody who experiences depression, anxiety, or really low lows. This is a plan that could potentially save your life and be able to help you get out of those low places. So thank you so much for watching. I am very excited to be a part of the E360 TV platform and Achieve TV channel. And I hope that you join us again next week. or coming up this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for Warrior Wednesdays. And that'll be the first time that we will be live on Wednesdays. So I'm very, very excited. But thank you again for watching. All right. Bye, y'all.